are going to go ahead and get started. This is workshop 1. We will be covering 2 topics, the lean canvas and financial modeling. So first off, we always like to congratulate you. It's always great when we have students that are entrepreneurial minded, because you all are pretty much the future of entrepreneurship and small business in our community. So the fact that you're willing to come up with an idea and pursue it to see if it's viable, it's great. So kudos to you all. So your presenters today, myself, Karen, and Nick. You should know us from the launch event. So we work for EAP, the Entrepreneurial Accelerator Program, and this is actually our 4th pitch competition. Previously, we had done competitions at LSUS, Northwestern State University, Grambling, and you guys are number 4, and we're also doing ULM. So hopefully sometime in the future we'll have like the winners from each school come together and have like a clash of the champions type event. So now just to go over I know this was presented last evening, but I just want to give you a reminder because it's a lot of workshops and I don't want for anyone to get confused as to where we are in the process. So it's a 3-phase competition. Initially, the application is due on February 8th, so don't miss that date. And also, we're in the first workshop. So we actually have 2 more workshops after this one. And let me go back. Sorry for the format issues, but probably the computer. And then the final submission is due on March 14th, and then we have the final pitch. The final pitch, only the top 5 will actually pitch live. So every person that submits the final submission will also need to do a 2-minute video of your pitch. But after you submit that, we will review all of the other deliverables, and then we'll choose the top 5, and you'll be able to pitch live at the event on April 13th. So that's pretty much the structure. Any questions on that? All right. So again, your initial submission is just a questionnaire. So you just need to log into the Canvas and complete the questionnaire. I believe it's 29 to like 30 questions. It takes less than 25 minutes to complete. However, once you go through this process with all the workshops, you will be required to submit the deliverables here. So the financial model, lean canvas, 1-page executive summary, and your video. And templates will be provided for everything. So now, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the lean canvas and financial modeling. We always like to start with a quote. And this quote, to sum it up, it's not about fighting against the old methods and the old models, but building your own new thing. So this could be in relation to a new business, a new idea, or some sort of new invention. So just keep in mind that you're focusing on new and you're learning from the old. All right, so the lean methodology. How many of you have heard before about the lean canvas or the lean methodology? By show of hands. Okay, how many of you are business students? Okay, good. Okay, so just before we get in there, I just want to make sure that you all understand the difference between lifestyle businesses and an actual startup. So a lifestyle business is your typical small business, your mom and pop shop. They're usually very easy to start up because of low capital needs. Usually they're low risk with moderate return. So when I say low risk, for instance, if I wanted to open up a restaurant, there's a pretty good chance that I'll get customers in the door, the first day, second day, and so forth. And also moderate return depending on the scalability of the restaurant model that you build. Most likely you won't be able to sell to people in California or across the world because there's some limitations to what you can do with a brick and mortar restaurant unless you're freezing produce and shipping it across the world. And also usually it's for long term, so I can start a business and then I can run it for 20, 30 years and then I can pass it on to my children and so forth. But a startup, on the other end, it usually starts very small and it scales very quickly. And the ultimate goal is to have some sort of exit. And when I say exit, I mean some sort of acquisition, a merger, or another company just coming in and taking it over. So when I know that a lot of times when you talk about starting businesses, you'll hear the word used a lot. Well, we're starting up, we're creating a startup. Just keep in mind that a startup is usually something that is in the technology space, invention space, and it has some sort of intellectual property, something that really makes it special and unique that would cause it to scale very quickly and would cause either a large corporation, a larger company to want to acquire it. So most times the startup is the one that will have you, people want to pretty much do it for about 5 to 10 years and retire, you know, because you pretty much had like a $200 million exit. And you've heard about these in the news before, like for instance when Facebook acquired Instagram, you know, more recently I think Waiter was acquired. So those are the types of companies that operate in the startup space. So by looking at this, depending on your idea, you should be able to determine whether you're starting a lifestyle business or a startup. Anyone has like a question about being unsure? So who is starting a lifestyle business? Okay, what's your business?
It's art.
Okay.
Art dealerships.
Okay. And everybody else believes that they have a startup.
No.
Okay.
We have like a Mexican restaurant.
Okay. Do you want to franchise it out or?
Yes.
Okay, so then that could be a potential start. It could be both. So if it was one location, that would be more like a lifestyle type business. But considering that you want to pursue the franchise model, that's something that could potentially scale across the country. All right. So you're probably wondering, like, how come we haven't really used the terminology a lot in this competition so far about business plan? So what happened with the business plan? Well, it's very simple, and we always use the Tyson's Law, which states that everyone has, so y'all know Mike Tyson, right? He was a heavyweight boxer back in the day. And he used to say that everyone has a plan until I punch them in the face. And for many entrepreneurs, experienced entrepreneurs, they will tell you that starting a business is like getting punched in the face. So you might have all these wonderful ideas, wonderful predictions and projections about what your product or service could potentially do on the market. But then when you actually get to market, reality sets in, and then you realize how much work it requires and how much different your perceptions might be now that you're actually doing it. So we are actually in what is called the business model generation, and this is where you actually come up with an MVP, which is your minimum viable product. And how do you do that? You go through a process where you get a lot of feedback, and one of the tools of using or doing this is actually the lean canvas. And again, I apologize about the formatting. I think it's just the computer program. But nevertheless, so the customer feedback loop, there's this book, if you all wanted to purchase it and read some more. It's called The Lean Startup, and it came out years ago, and they pretty much introduced this to a much more agile and lean process of starting businesses. So it's no longer about getting behind a desk in a room and writing a business plan for like 2 weeks to 2 months. You print it out, it's all glossy and perfect, and you're like, yes, I'm accomplished, I'm going to start a business. In 2 years, I'm going to be driving a Ferrari, and I'm just going to be rich. That doesn't happen. Everyone knows that. So, and as you know, most times your business plan will change probably 20 times before you even get your product to market. So why waste time writing a 60-page document that will change so many times before you actually get it to market? So this is a process of, we call it build, measure, learn. So you come up with your idea first, and then you start building out the essential building blocks for a business model. So you talk about your problem, solution, your unique value proposition, and we'll get into that later. And then you come up with your product or service. So design it out and do all that good stuff. And you measure by various ways. You can do feedback, you can, if it's a restaurant, you can maybe come up with samples and present it to your potential customers and be like, do you like this one? Is it too spicy? And you get all that data, compile it, and then you make your assumptions based on the information that you collect. And then you go through the process to come up with your MVP. 2 important terms that I need y'all to remember about the build, measure, learn loop is iteration and pivot. Iterate in the most simple form is when you make a very small tactical change to your strategy. So let's say that you, I'm going to use a restaurant example because it's very easy. Let's say that you started off, with like a dining type structure to where people can come in and you have waiters serve, and then you realize it's just too cost intensive, it takes too long, and you were to switch to like a more Chipotle style. That would be like a slight change in your structure. But a pivot is if you started off as a Mexican restaurant and then you completely changed it to like Tex-Mex or American something or German or whatever. It's a completely different strategic change, completely different direction. So as you go through the process, remember you might start off with, okay, this is my business, these are my customers, this is what I want to do. But when you actually go talk to your customers, they might give you a completely different picture. And it's important to know when to iterate, and it's important to know when to pivot because it saves dollars and time. Alright, so this is the very basic lean canvas. And it's essentially 9 building blocks for a business. We will go through an example, but this is what you'll see if you ever Google it. And for informational purposes only, there's a business model canvas and there's a lean canvas. A lean canvas is basically for anyone that has a new concept, a new idea, new business invention. A business model canvas could be used for someone that has been in business for maybe 5 years and they just want to relook at their business to make sure that everything is making sense and restructure, see if they need to make any changes. And really it's just about 1, 2, 3, and I think 4 boxes that are different on the business model canvas. So if y'all ever see something that looks like this and it looks a little bit weird, it's the business model canvas. Alright, so this is the one that we at EAP typically use for our entrepreneurs that will come in. And if you notice, there are 2 new sections, and this is because most universities that we work with want students to start thinking about community impact. So this can fall into the category of social entrepreneurship, but it can also, and basically what this is how will your business help the community from a environmental perspective as well as people. How will you serve your community, and will you do anything in terms of, eco-friendly or so forth? So start thinking about how that works, and then for the vision, what is the ultimate goal for your business? So are you just starting a business just because you have a cool idea? Is this something that you want to do for the rest of your life? Do you want to start something that could be categorized as a startup to scale quickly and exit? You need to start thinking about, do you want to franchise it out? So what is the vision, the long-term goal for your business? And then I'll explain each category as we go through it. Any questions? All right. Okay, so the example, EcoFresh, is a non-toxic dry cleaning service in Shreveport, Louisiana. And to start off with your lean canvas is very simple. You want to go ahead and date it. Dating is very important, and I'll explain why. Put iteration 1, and then you start here. Now, depending on what it is, you can either start with your problem or your customer segment. But for this example, we'll start with the problem. So it's very simple. There are no non-toxic dry cleaning services in Shreveport, Louisiana. And then you want to go ahead and state the alternatives, traditional dry cleaning services. It's very important that you be very concise and brief with your lean canvas. If you notice, the boxes are very small for a reason, because it's oftentimes said that brevity is an art. So sometimes it's very difficult for people to tell you exactly what they're doing in few amount of words as possible. So you need to be able to know exactly what you're doing so well that you can be very concise and get to the point, get to the meat of the matter really quickly. And then your customer segment. So this is basically defining what your customer looks like. Now, if you tell me Again, the example for the restaurant. I'm opening a Mexican restaurant. Who's your customer? And you say, well, everyone, because everyone eats. That's not segmentation. So you need to be very specific about who your customer is. So you have in the handout, there's a terminology list. So anything that you see on here that may be unfamiliar, you can always refer to it. So B2C means business to consumer, right? So you have several different forms. You have business to business. That's where you may have like a manufacturing business and you sell your products to Walmart, right? And then Walmart is the wholesaler that will sell directly to the consumer. And then you have B2G, which is business to government. Some businesses sell directly to the government. And then the one that is becoming more popular because of a few platforms is consumer to consumer. So C2C. And an example of that would be eBay, Etsy, to where you're utilizing a platform, but you're selling directly to your customer, selling directly to another customer. All right, so you need to determine which mode of transaction you will utilize. And then just some interesting facts about your customer. Age is always a good one. Education is a good one. Household income, social habits. For this one, it would be health conscious individuals. You don't want to put anything derogatory on there like tree huggers or anything like that. So just make sure you have a good profile of who your customer is. And then you want to go to your solution. Very simple, an eco-friendly dry cleaning service downtown Shreveport, Louisiana. Your unique value proposition. So now I'm going to differentiate real quick between 4 and 5 because most people tend to get confused, and it's very simple. So 4, your unique value proposition is to your customer. So what you're offering to your customer, what makes it unique? What makes you special? Is it that you're helping them to save time? Is it that you are helping them to save money? Is it that you're offering a unique experience? For this example, it is basically offering a non-toxic option that's not available locally. So it's very unique because it's not here. And then for your unfair advantage, this is over your competition. So you have to the customer, and then your unfair advantage is what is it that gives you the upper, leg over the competition. So it could be some sort of intellectual property like a patent, a trade secret, a trademark. It could be grandma's recipes. It could be a celebrity. It could be some sort of new invention. It could be your team, just the know-how. So you need to understand what is it that I have or I possess in my business that makes me better than the competition. It could just be capitalizing on some sort of niche that you see that, is overlooked. So just make sure that you don't get the two confused. And now for your channels, this is basically how do you get the information to your customer. And the best ways to think about this is in terms of promotion and place. So for promotion, you were thinking about advertising, marketing. So will you use social media, TV, direct mail, all the various forms of advertising that you are probably receiving when you turn on TV, when you go check your mail and there's like a coupon to go get a discount on a new burger or something, or when you get onto social media and you see, okay, this store has a sale or whatever. Which channels do you believe will be best for your customers? Now, social media is the easiest because it's the most, cost effective. Some people would say you can even do some social media where you don't have to spend a dime. Just set up a page and start sharing the links. YouTube channel, set that up. And then you can go all the way to billboards, radio, and so forth. So just make sure you have at least, I would say, 2 or 3 to start with, and then you can branch out. Okay, so we did one thing. Okay, so your revenue streams, this is basically your inflow of cash. How does your business make money? So for some businesses, It may be very simple, sale of products and services. For others, it may not be as clear. So I think everyone in here will be selling some sort of product or service, except you, right? You'll have advertising, right? Okay, so that would be another form of revenue, would be advertising. It could also be some sort of subscription. So you might be selling a subscription to a platform. But just make sure that you fully understand all the different ways that your business can make money. It may not be one way. So, you know, a perfect example is, was it HelloFresh? I think HelloFresh, they started off selling, you know, the box with all the food and stuff in there, but then they started selling ads on the box. So when you open up the box, you see an ad in there. So just make sure that you're getting all the various ways you can potentially make money with your business. Alright, so now cost structure. This is internally. This is everything from your startup cost to your operational cost, and Nick will go very, you know, in detail with that when he gets to that section. But what resources will be required for you to get the business started? And then once the business is started, what resources will be required in terms of cash, money, capital, for you to actually keep the doors open? So it's anything from your lease to your equipment to employees to you know, everything else that's listed on there. Your marketing, website management. If you have some sort of licensing that you need to go ahead and secure, you need to make sure that you document all of your various costs, and not just, you know, for the first 2 months, but we usually recommend that you do 3 years, 2 to 3 years. But for this competition, we'll just have you do 1 year. So you don't have to worry about going that far out. So in its core, that is pretty much the lean canvas. And if you notice, we were able to do it in probably less than 10 minutes. Probably longer because I'm explaining what the terms mean. It should not take you more than 25 minutes. If it does, you're doing it wrong. So the point is to go ahead and get it done, put your assumptions on there, and then start getting feedback. So maybe asking family members, other students, setting up like a survey, and just maybe asking them, for instance, if I were to set up a survey for this, would you be interested in a non-toxic dry cleaning service? So right now, the dry cleaning service for a shirt might be $195. Would you be willing to pay, you know, $295? Just get that feedback from customers so that, one, you would know if the business is viable locally, and then two, you would know the price point that customers are comfortable with. So they might say, well, I would pay $350, you know, and then you realize you're underpricing your product. Now, in terms of the vision, this company, they want to establish a national franchise, and in terms of the community impact, they would partner with the Providence House to help employ the women that actually go there for help. So this is your lean canvas in a nutshell. Questions? It's pretty simple, very straightforward. All right, so key points to remember: be concise, 10 minutes or less. That should say get feedback, document your assumptions, and remember when to iterate and pivot. So that's pretty much it, and we want to give y'all some time to maybe just, you know, work on yours and get as much feedback as possible. The handouts, you have the lean canvas that was actually on the board, and then the second page is the instructions, and then you have the startup terminologies. So if there's anything that you see on any of the worksheets, you can just refer to your terminology list, and you'll be able to see what it means. And with that, I already asked other questions. I'll have Nick.
Cool.
We're good? Okay, so before we,
all good?
because I feel like I went through that really fast, so y'all feel very confident that you can fill it out for your own business. Okay,
Yeah.
no concerns, okay. Good.
Thanks, Karen.
You're welcome.
So, financial modeling. How many of you love Excel? Or you just love it? Just can't get it. Yeah. Most people, it's
I'm
not
the only one.
not that energetic. So I'm gonna go through a little bit about what a financial model looks like that we typically use, and we'll talk about what the resources we've provided for you guys and answer any questions that you have. So, what is a financial model? Let's start there. It's really just process of building an abstract representation of a real-world financial situation. What does that mean? So basically, when you're starting a business, you got to forecast a bunch of stuff. You got to look at expenses, both from a startup perspective and then ongoing operationally, and you kind of have to put those on paper as best as you can. And that's why we call it an abstract representation, because a lot of times we can gather as much data as we can find, but it'll only be so accurate until we start refining it. And that's why Karen always talks about iterating as far as the lean methodology, because what you initially put on paper, as you kind of peel the onion a little bit, you'll start learning, oh, maybe I overestimated how much this costs, or maybe I underestimated the ongoing cost of this from on a day-to-day basis. And that's why we call it an abstract representation, because you kind of iterate on it as you get more and more information. So what's it used for? To start out, chiefly it's used for fundraising. So you'll create it and you'll go out to an investor and say, look, this is my model that I've developed. This is how I'm going to make money. This is how much money I'm going to make, and this is how you're going to get paid back. And that's why you use it in the outset, because obviously you need to raise money to get started. And then it's used on an ongoing basis to both grow your business and for budgeting and forecasting once you're up and running. How many of you have worked in a business before where you've had to do like budgets or expense reports or anything like that? Y'all had some exposure to that? So that probably at some point originated with a financial model of some sort, whether it was built in Excel or QuickBooks or something, because you have to base those numbers off of some assumption that you have to make. And additionally, you can use it. It's really important in both valuing your business and selling your business if you get to the point of selling your business to a third party, because they're going to want to know how much you value your business for, so that you can kind of start that negotiation process of selling to a bigger business or selling to a third party to get out of your business. If you either want to liquidate and kind of take your earnings and go off and live on an island somewhere, or plow it back into another business idea that you have. So you really need that solid financial model so that you can then do some other sort of valuation model of like a DCF or some other sort of valuation based on metrics of your industry. So it's really important for that, because you have to have a basis for whatever you're saying. So what is a financial statement, or what is a financial model made up of? We talked about this a little bit last night. A typical one is an income statement or P&L, a cash flow statement, and a balance sheet. I know most of y'all are business majors, so hopefully y'all know the basics of all those things. And just for the sake of this competition, we're not going to ask you to do like, are we asking for all three or just?
It's just the P&L.
Just the P&L. So just the income statement. We're not asking you to forecast balance sheet information. That's kind of beyond the scope of what we're looking for here. And cash flow statement, don't worry about that either. So we just want to see how you're going to make money and how much money you're going to make and how much you're going to spend on your expenses and how much money you're going to make from that. That's kind of all we ask for in this competition. So within your financial model, there's a few areas that we want to consider. We want to look at our assets, we want to look at our expenses, and we want to look at different financing sources. So we're going to talk about what our assets are, and then look through our expenses, and then talk about different ways we can pursue financing, the different avenues that we have that may be good options for you. So let's get started. So assets. First, we're going to talk about tangible assets. Now, obviously, the most tangible asset is cash money. So that's number one chief asset, and you can use that money to then purchase other things with, obviously. Land, property being the most important one. We met with a guy today who wants to do a manufacturing business. He's going to need some property to put that manufacturing equipment on so that he can get his business started. So you can either lease that property, you can buy that property outright. Obviously, there's different cash considerations for both of those things, so you have to think about that. Kind of on the scope of tangible to intangible, IP is right in the middle, right? So it has a tangible value, but it's not necessarily something you can tangibly touch, right? So IP is anything like a patent or some sort of secret protected thing that your business has that protects it from competition. And there's a value on that. It's literally, it can be valued on a balance sheet. So that's an asset for you. Intangible assets, these are things that you can't really see, but you can kind of feel in yourself. These are kind of personal assets that we like to address within the confines of a financial model. So you may not see them listed on a balance sheet or anything, but they're definitely part of your own success as an entrepreneur, your own knowledge about your industry, about your opportunity, about whatever business you're pursuing. You have to have that knowledge in order to capitalize on that opportunity. Obviously, I wouldn't go into trying to build an airplane. Like that's not what I know. That's not where my knowledge is. So it wouldn't be a smart use of my time. Traction. So if you have some sort of outside influence that can help you be a success, maybe it's social media. Maybe you have a good social media following that can help you capitalize on this business opportunity. Those are what we think of when we think about traction. Something that's going to help you get started quickly, and something that's going to help you be successful in the long run. And the final one we always talk about is just your personal drive. I mean, any time you read about successful entrepreneurship stories, they're going to go through really high peaks and really low valleys, and you have to be able to weather that storm, and a lot of times that takes your personal drive. So again, not something that you can put a number on, but it's something that's extremely important in your overall success as a business owner. Next side of the equation is expenses. We like to, when we're looking at a financial model from a 1,000-foot view, we like to look at pre-launch expenses and what we call the survival phase. Think about this as like the first 12 months in operations or the first 2 years, something like that. You have to budget for those things, and those two things combined could be considered what your raise would be. So think about if someone goes on Shark Tank and they need $500,000. A lot of times those businesses are already launched, but sometimes they're looking for that amount of money to get to the next stage of their business. Maybe they need to spread to 10 new markets to sell their product to. That's how they're going to do it, is that $500,000. So these two things together could be considered your ask. So at the end of your presentation, if you get to pitch in front of the judges, you can say, okay, I need this much money. And we'll talk about each of those in a second. So your pre-launch expenses are things really you just need to get going. They can be anything from registering your business with the state to buying equipment to maybe spending money on a marketing campaign out the gate that really gets you off the ground and up and running. And these are your classic startup expenses. So if you need 6 pieces of equipment, say if you're opening a restaurant, you can't just, a lot of times some people may want to start out with like doing it small scale. Maybe, I know a lot of times in Shreveport they've started out doing restaurants in like the brewery. So maybe in that respect you don't need a ton of equipment. Maybe you just need like a fryer or a flat top or some other basic piece of equipment as opposed to trying to outfit a whole restaurant. So obviously you have to weigh the way that you want to grow. Do you want to go all in all at once, or do you want to kind of phase approach that type of business? So whatever those expenses are for you, those are going to be your startup expenses. Does that make sense? Everybody clear on that? So your survival phase. This is the, like I said, the runway, or the first 12 months, first 16 months, whatever you think is an adequate amount of time for you to really get your business off the ground and making substantial revenue. And this is how you budget for that. So you look at things that are going to be reoccurring, whether they're on a monthly or a quarterly basis. Think about subscriptions that you're going to have to subscribe to within your business. Maybe it's QuickBooks, maybe it's Office 365. All those things have a cost. They're not normally super high, but they are something that you're going to have to pay on a reoccurring basis that you're going to have to budget for. So what I like to do is think about worst case scenario. I mean, what that number is if you don't make a dime of revenue, and kind of backtrack from there. So think about what is worst case scenario and then budget out from that. So if your operations if it takes $1,000 to run your whole business for a month, and you want to budget for 12 months, obviously that's $12,000 that you have to add to your initial ask. And that's assuming you make no revenue. So if you get 3 sales in the first month, you're already ahead of the game. That's kind of how I like to think about it. because it probably won't be that bad. So if it's anything above that, it'll be a better time for you. And then random stuff like advertising and marketing or insurance, those things are all part of that operational expense. So questions about that before we get to financing? I know I'm kind of rushing through this, but do you have any questions? No? Good. More smart. Either that or you're on.
Nick, I have a question. Do you have like a range, like, to me, I mean, what are, in terms of estimating these expenses, are they trying to get like within like a 20%
Yeah,
confidence
I mean,
interval? I mean, they haven't done it, so it's.
Sure, yeah. And there's, like I said, there's some things that you can forecast more easily than others. Like, equipment normally has a base price, you know. I mean, if it's something you can buy off Amazon, you can find an easy price. But if it's something like forecasting how much you're going to spend on marketing, it may be kind of what you think, you know. I mean, it's just what you're comfortable with at that point. It is kind of guesswork in some point.
And also to piggyback on that, I think Google has made, financial modeling a lot easier for so many of us, because in terms of things like insurance, equipment, basic things like business registration or whatnot, you can easily look that stuff up. You can call and find out, what does it cost? You know, I have this type of business. What is the insurance, policies that I can potentially have on this? So you can get different quotes, but as Nick said, usually where you do kind of operate in the dark is when you're projecting your sales and any sort of marketing that goes along with that sales. So, but everything else in relation to your business, like rent, you can look that up and see what's available. Go ahead.
Couldn't you base, like, if you find a market similar to what you want, couldn't you base your sales off what they did?
That is,
Like,
yeah.
if, for the example, to the restaurant, you could look up what other franchisees had done for a few years and.
You can use it as the basis to your assumption.
Mm-hmm.
However, it depends on if the restaurant is in the same market, if they're operating in the same type of cuisine, the area that they're located. So you can make some changes based on, if they're looking at someone that is located in Texas, that's a completely different market than Shreveport, Louisiana. So basing your assumptions or basing your projections off of a much larger market, you can scale it down. So you can maybe discount it by like 60%, depending on the population differential.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I'll do like a best, base, and worst case for my models. And maybe base is what I think is reasonable, and best case is maybe that with a premium of 25% or something, and worst is that discounted 15%. I mean, it is sometimes an art, but we always like to say that the costs, you can forecast most costs. Some that are a little vague, but you can forecast most costs. It's the revenue that's kind of the dark art, right? You never know how many customers you're going to get in the first quarter or the first year. So that's why we say best, base, and worst. And if you go to your worst case and you're still being able to pay back investors at a reasonable rate and make an income without killing yourself, basically, that's normally a vetting mechanism for you as the opportunity. It's probably a good deal. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
How long, like, if your business model, you're up and running and if you're not getting any income, how long do you wait before you pivot? Because there's that line where you can go a different direction and not, waste all the money you've invested, or how, like, is it a couple months or is it a year?
It's really case by case, because for instance, let's say I can use Alibaba. I was listening to a podcast, and he said for the first 3 years they had no significant profits from the business, and profit, as you know, is different from revenue. So he basically was almost homeless, running a website and almost homeless. So that's different. But if you're running maybe a product sale type company, and you're into 12 months and you're not selling anything, it's probably something wrong with your product. So it really depends on the industry and the type of offering that you have. So if it's a technology company, to where it's a completely new concept that requires an adoption period for it to really scale, well, yeah, you can go year, 2 years maybe. But for products, you know, if it's a restaurant and you don't have any customers,
Yeah.
there's probably something wrong with your product.
Yeah, and I also think about like the way the cost structure of that business is set up. Like, for example, subscription-based businesses sell at really high multiples because they have really low operating expenses. So when they get customers, they can have a runway of longer than if you're selling just a product, right? Because if you're selling a product and you sell a product to me, then I probably won't need that product for another period of time. But if it's a subscription-based model, I'm paying you $10 a month or $20 a month, then you're going to have some recurring revenue that you can kind of lean on and depend on that will extend your runway a little bit further than if you're just depending on selling X number of widgets every month. Does that make sense?
And I guess to answer your question, it really is a case-by-case scenario. So you need to really know your business, know your product, know your customer. So if your customer, you know, by not coming in you really want to ask and see what's going on. So that's an opportunity for you to get out there and figure out, okay, what's going on? Why isn't, you know, my product or my business growing? Okay.
Anything else? Yep.
Can we make any changes on this canvas after we submit it?
When you say changes, what do you mean?
Like, if we will do like more research and find out that something is like wrong or something can be changed, is that possible to change that?
Absolutely, and if I didn't make that clear, so your version 1 of your lean canvas should be completely different to your version, let's say 5.
Okay.
So the point is for you to go through that feedback loop. So once you get to the very top again, you need to look at it and be like, okay, I thought that, you know, I was, you know, selling customers a product, but they're actually more concerned about the experience. You know, so your value proposition is no longer just product,
Right.
but you're creating an experience, something that's memorable that can, you know, last a lifetime. So you want to change it, you know, not like sporadically or just without any sort of basis, but make sure that you, when you do update it, that you have some significant changes to it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? I got one more section. So, final thing we're going to talk about is sources of capital. And this is how the money that you ask for is structured. So there's many different ways that money can be structured. And we're going to talk about, I think it's 8 different ways? Yeah, we're going to go through all 8. So, the most basic and what most people think of when they think about entrepreneurship and the hustle of owning your own business is self-financing, right? So this is basically just, we call it bootstrapping in the industry. It's basically just you pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps and supplementing using your current employment or current income or whatever to supplement the starting of your business. So if you have a savings account that you want to tap into to get your business off the ground, or if you're working at another job and you're going to kind of try to contribute to it that way, that's how you finance that. And the positives there is that you obviously don't give up any ownership in your business. The negatives are that it's all on you. So some people thrive on that. Some people like that pressure. It's just about personal preference. So that's what self-financing is. Next one is right outside of you personally is your family and your friends. So a lot of times when we're talking about startups that scale, they'll have a bootstrapping round where they kind of prove the idea maybe just to themselves or to their friends, and then the first people they go talk to when they think their idea is successful is their family and their friends. So maybe they have a wealthy friend that's been successful in another career field that they say, hey, listen to this idea that I have, maybe you could take part in it and help me get it off the ground. Or same with a family member. And I mean, no one's going to trust and believe in you more than your mom probably. So that may be a good place for you to start. So if you can sell that to your family and friends and sell them on the idea, maybe they want to invest in your business. And chances are their investment terms are probably going to be more favorable than going to a bank or going to a private equity group or a venture capital firm, right? So that's another area that you can ask for capital from. Third is commercial loans or bank loans, and this is kind of what people traditionally think of when they think of raising money, right? You walk into a bank, you talk to a loan officer, the loan officer sits down and says, okay, well, what's your business? Let's talk about how we can make it successful. But the thing is, they're going to look for some assets to collateralize against and to borrow against in order to give you money. So we have seen this as a success opportunity for some of the companies that we've looked at, but it's kind of unique because you need to have land, or you need to have property, you need to have equipment to collateralize that loan off of, so that you can get that money, right? It's just like a mortgage, right? If you want to buy a home, you're going to have to mortgage that, and you're going to have to borrow money from a bank. It's the same thing with businesses. And again, the positives here are that you don't have to give up any ownership in your entity. The negatives are that you're taking on debt, you're risking that, whatever asset that is that you're borrowing against, and obviously there's an interest rate that you have to pay back for that as well. So again, commercial loans may be a good opportunity for you, but it just depends on what your business is. State and local lending programs. So these are a bit of a unique opportunity that people tend to forget about. A lot of governmental bodies or community organizations or even some federal dollars can be used. You can tap those for grant funding. And I know Dave last night, if you were here at the beginning, he mentioned that in Texas they have a Houston, I think it's the Houston Biomedical Fund or something like that. So if you go out and raise money in the biomedical field in Texas, the state of Texas will match those dollar for dollar up to $1 million. So that's, again, additional capital that you can take advantage of. That's not going to knock you down on your cap table. So it's not going to affect your ownership. So Lift Fund is one that's popular in Louisiana. So make sure to look that up and learn more about those opportunities and see if they're right for you. So private investors, angel investors, or family offices. This is the Shark Tank person, I guess you could call it. So this is getting up in front of people or talking to an investor that's wealthy, individually wealthy, and saying, hey, I want you to invest in my business. And normally they will say, okay, we like this idea, here's our terms. They kind of set the terms. They'll say, you know, this is a good opportunity, but we want 50% of the company for $500,000 or something like that. So a lot of times you can go to one or two or maybe just a few of these people and finish your raise, but the terms could be restrictive. You could have to, you're going to have to give up ownership most of the time, or structure it in a way where they share in the benefit of the company, obviously, because they're investing money in you, and they're going to be looking for a return on their investment. So that's what private investors are. And angel investors are, are y'all familiar with the term angel investor? Okay. So an angel investor is just a private investor in an early stage company. So it's basically someone outside of the friends and family realm that you can go to and say, hey, this is a new business idea. And normally it's someone that is independently wealthy or had a business that they started and they sold it and made a good amount of money, and then it's kind of paying it forward a little bit and saying, okay, well, I was an entrepreneur. I know the struggles of being an entrepreneur. I'm going to support you in the early stages of you doing that too. So that's kind of what an angel investor is, but they're still going to want some ownership for that investment.
It's defined on your sheet too, just in case you
Okay,
forget.
perfect. You're so on top of it. So final one, or next final one, is large institutions. So this is venture capitalists or VC funding. These are guys that you'll go to after angel investors or after maybe your first round of financing through like a family office or something. These are institutional guys. These are guys that partner with you after your business model is pretty proven and you're on the track record towards either an exit or being bought up by a big company or an IPO. Kind of like, it's basically where Uber and Lyft are right now, right? So they're private companies, their business model has been proven, they're worth a ton of money, they've taken tons of money from VCs, and they're on the road to an IPO, right? Initial public offering, going public, being listed on a stock exchange. Grants. These are similar to the state and local funds, except a lot of times they're federal dollars, and they're federal dollars relative to some specific industry. And so there's a lot of grants out there for the medical field. There's a lot of grants out there for like cyber defense, Social entrepreneurship is another key area. Again, these are maybe federal institutions or maybe big private foundations that grant out dollars in every quarter or every year. Kauffman Foundation, I'm sure they do grants. So Kauffman Foundation is a big one that does a lot of grant money. And the biggest perk on these, they're non-dilutive. So just like the Texas Biomedical Fund, any dollar that you get from a grant, you just, as long as you spend it appropriately, that's all you have to worry about. You know, you don't have to worry about giving up ownership. You don't have to worry about managing an investor. It's just a pool of money that you can throw into your business to prove whatever you're trying to prove. And the final one, crowdfunding. So y'all have probably seen something go viral on either Facebook or YouTube or something where someone creates a crowdfunding page for some new business or new story that they want to have made or some movie that they want to make. And this has become a huge thing, a huge form of funding in the last probably 10 or 12 years as Kickstarter and Indiegogo have taken off. And they are reputable and there are legitimate ways to raise capital. It's just really hard because you have to prove yourself and you have to stand out from a crowd in that. So typically the most successful ones have really strong marketing campaigns behind them. They have really strong content, whether it's videos or advertising or just branding. Those types of projects can be successful on crowdfunding sites, but you have to find something that helps you stand out and rise above the slew of other people that are on the site, because there's a ton of them, obviously. So those are the main areas of financing. Oh, I forgot this slide. So why are managing your finances important? So we talked about all the ways that you can raise money. You can get grant money, you can take on an investor, you can go to a bank, but why is that always important? So if you look up the top 20 reasons startups fail, the top 2 are related to cash. Well, actually, the second one's related to cash, I'm sorry. So number 1, obviously, if there's no market need, then you're gonna fail. If there's really no need for your business, if there's no people that benefit from your product or a problem that you solve for people, you're probably not gonna do well. But the number 2 answer is the running out of cash. And we call this undercapitalizing. So if you're raising capital, the single worst thing you can do as you're building your business is running out of cash. Because obviously what happens when you run out of cash? Your business goes under, right? So there's a lot of times where businesses are still in that that R&D mode where they're saying, okay, well, we have a product or we have a service and we have to find our customer, and we're still in that process of doing it, but then they don't raise enough money and they run out of money, or they have to raise and start a new round of financing, and their focuses get all thrown off, and they just get all screwed up basically, and then they have to close down shop because they don't have any cash. So that's why we say capitalizing your business is important, and thinking about not only your startup expenses, but the money that you're going to have to run in the actual operations once you get started. So that's why finances are important. So before we talk about that, any questions on any of those 8 areas of capital? What do you guys think about that? Yeah, what's up?
You know, we go to your angel fund meetings.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll ask the entrepreneur to raise capital as part of the package that they get.
Mm-hmm.
And is that a function of how much they're asking, or is that just a function of, you know, the credibility of their idea, or is there some conditions where you would ask them to raise their own as part of getting some funding?
Well, typically, yeah, and the answer to that is because our fund is not set up to take on like the whole round. So if you're raising $500,000 in a round, for example, and you came to our fund's probably not going to cut a check for the whole opportunity, because one, that's breaking some of the ways the fund is meant to operate, like putting too much of the capital into one opportunity, and 2, we like to take part in it, but we also like exactly what you said, to go out to other investors to prove that the idea is worthwhile and that other people can get behind it, because it helps substantiate you as a business if you can raise money from multiple
And
groups of
also
investors.
spread the risk across
Yeah, yeah, and it de-risks it purely. It's kind of a selfish thing for us. It de-risks it for us because if we take on the whole opportunity and you go belly up, well, we're out $500,000. But if we only take 10% of the raise, we're only out 50, right? So it is. We have gotten some feedback from investors or from entrepreneurs. They're like, "Oh, I thought you were going to just take the whole deal." Well, that's not really how it works because the fund is capped out at a certain amount of money, and we can't just like throw money willy-nilly at an opportunity.
Makes sense. Thanks.
And for those of you that believe that you're starting a startup, it's very common for many entrepreneurs that are getting started to be able to efficiently raise money from multiple sources. So most times if you're raising like $1 million or $2 million, you don't just go to one person and get a check. Now it has happened twice now. Is it twice?
Maybe twice.
Yeah, maybe twice. And we vetted almost what, 700 companies. So 700 companies, and it's happened twice. So you have to be very comfortable in being able to pitch your idea to someone that can invest in your company and being able to convince them to actually do it. So don't think in your mind that I'm just gonna go to like an angel investor and they're just gonna give me a check for $1 million. You'll probably have to do it like 6, 7, 8 times, even more to get half of that.
Yeah, that's definitely not the norm. And in fact, it's kind of funny because both companies that's an option for have needed to raise over $1.5 million, which you would think
Yeah,
that one
the
person would
more.
just take 200,000, but they want more. It's funny.
That's two anomalies that
Yeah.
just happen.
Also, think about like a combination of multiple financing sources that we talked about. Like we have a biomedical, I guess you'd call it a biomedical play, that raised some money through the angel fund, and then they were going to raise money through other angel investors coming into the same round, but they won grants instead. So they were able, I think they needed to raise $300,000. Maybe they raised 200 from investors, and then another 100, and they actually won more from grants. Well, that allows them to not put another investor on the cap table, and it helps them maintain more ownership in their company because that money is non-dilutive. Does that make sense? So think about that. I mean, maybe you're a good candidate for a grant. Maybe you're a good candidate for some other state funding institution because there's a lot out there. You just got to look for them because they're usually government entities. They're not well advertised and they're not well marketed, but they are there, and it is mandated that a state or a foundation has to spend those dollars. So be selfish. Be out on the lookout for those and pursue them.
Grantwatch.com. It's a great website for grants for entrepreneurs. You have to pay for a subscription, but if you just want to look for opportunities, you can actually see what it is, and then you can maybe subscribe for a week, grab it, and then end your subscription. Grantwatch.com.
Yeah, it's a great resource. So, final submission. So what we just talked about, we want you to estimate your startup costs, whatever it is that you need to help you get off the ground day one. We want you to project, I think it's 12 months of expenses. Yeah, 12 months of expenses on those operational expenses we talked about, marketing, advertising, insurance, salaries, all that stuff, to the best you can. And then obviously the opposite of that, project your revenue. Project how many customers you're going to get, how much revenue you're going to get from each customer. If you're selling a widget, how many widgets are you going to sell? If you're subscription-based model, how's that going to build, and what's your growth going to look like? And then we ask you to select 1 to 3 sources of capital of the ones we just talked about, relevant to your business. So bank loans, venture angel investors, family and friends, that kind of thing, grants. And then the templates for all that are actually going to be on Canvas. So Karen's done a great job of building a model that you can kind of just fill in. So we're not asking you to build the income statement. We're just asking you to say, okay, well, here's my expenses, here's my revenue, and we have the formulas built in already. So you don't even have to subtract. It's great. So there you go.
And also the handout that will help you with that process. So you guys should have one of these. And it pretty much lists all of like the common expenses that most new businesses would have. So it goes from your pre-launch expenses all the way to, you know, your operational expenses. So clearly, this is not, all of these don't apply to your business. So just go through, check through which ones, you know, you think would apply, and then start doing some research. So I know how much it is to register a business in Louisiana, and I'm not gonna tell you guys, but that's something that you wanna look up to know what that cost is. So, that's how you would go ahead and project your expenses for the pre-launch, but then for the monthly, just go ahead and put what it is. Will you have, a storefront? If you will have a storefront, you need to know how much rent is. And then it's very simple, for 12 months, just multiply by 12. And then for your revenue projection, you will have to do some sort of research to understand the market. So the restaurant example, again, if you're launching in Shreveport-Bossier area, what is the population? How many other Mexican restaurants do they have here? And what percentage of that population do you intend to capture like the first year? So if we have, you know, 200,000 to 400,000 people, and then I'm pretty sure you might be able to find some restaurant stats in terms of how often people go out to eat and things like that. You'll say you can do your projections based on that. And if you're selling a product, you know, so forth. And
Also for restaurants, I think it's funny because people always think the growth trajectory is like this for most businesses. For restaurants, it's kind of like this, right? So instead of just hockey sticking up, it starts off really high because you're new and you're fancy and you're the talk of the town, and then it'll level off. So hopefully it levels off as something that's still profitable. So think about that. Be realistic with your revenue. Don't think it's gonna make $0, $0, $0, $0, and then like $1 million, right? That'd be great, but that's probably not realistic for a restaurant. It may be realistic for a different business model. So.
okay, so this is pretty much a reflection of what the financial model will look like. So go ahead and list your pre-launch, your monthly, and then select at least one source of capital, maybe two. So if you have a restaurant, bank loan probably, maybe some sort of grant. Maybe for the building, you guys can have like what do you call it? The LED, is it the green buildings that there's a
Opportunity
grant.
zone?
No.
Oh, like
where you build it-
greenfields?
Yeah,
Greenfield?
where's efficient in terms of like water, energy. Do your research.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
LED.
It's LED? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so
Karen's smarter than me, guys.
he just doesn't remember right now. Okay, and then based on your assumptions for your pre-launch as well as your first year, your survival phase, you make an assumption about how much money you think you need to raise. So for instance, if it will take you $10,000 to get the business started, and then for your first year of operation, it requires maybe $50,000. I need y'all to tell me how much, so let me put that out there. If to get the business started is $10,000, and then for the first year is $50,000 of operational cost, give me an example of how much money you think you should ask for, based on what Nick presented. Should we ask for 60? Okay, why not?
Because that's best case scenario. You should, he mentioned, I think he said 15% for worst case scenario, so you'd add 15% of whatever, of that.
Yeah, and the other thing that, you know, because of the confines of this competition, we're not really able to expose you all to as well. There's some other costs that come into projecting, such as your working capital, as well as your cost of goods sold. So those are things that you can factor in there, but you can always do a multiple of how much ever the base is that you need. So definitely we don't want to see anyone.
If you're only raising 50 grand,
Yeah.
I mean, the difference between 50 and 100 is not much,
Yeah.
especially to like a seasoned professional investor. So just ask for 100. You know, they're not going to take your whole business for 100 grand. So
Yep.
that's the difference between you making it and not making it. It's a small price to pay.
Yeah. And remember, one of the top reasons why most businesses fail is because of undercapitalization. You just did not, you know, really capture all of the various costs that it would, that might come, just pop up, you know, that we need to take care of.
We go
So
through this.
where
We
do-
already did
where
this.
do we-
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other last questions before we wrap up? Open a diligent audience. What's up?
Alright, so, you've covered a lot of areas here, but one of the questions that I had was, just basically, estimating your revenue, because we didn't really cover that. And are we gonna be covering that on another night?
We can definitely, field questions in regard to estimating your revenue or projecting revenue. But it's really, you start from the market back, so you wanna have some research about who your potential customer is. So census.gov is a great place to start. So if, for instance, you're not selling online, but you're actually doing a storefront or some product that is delivered physically, you wanna understand what your population looks like with regard to your customer segment. So let's say you're selling to maybe Gen Z, so anyone that is, what are they, 15 and below, 16 and below. So, let's say millennials, so better. So millennials are
25 to
probably
44.
25 to 45 or whatnot, 44. You wanna look for the census information with regard to the millennial population in Shreveport-Bossier or the metro area. So maybe go out a 20, 30 mile radius, because if your store is here, most likely people probably won't drive more than 30 minutes or 45 minutes to get to your store. So if you say that there are 100,000 potential customers here, you might want to, that's why on that segmentation, it's very important to have a profile of who your customer is. So if your customer makes $50,000 or more, you might want to look at the household income within that demographic. And then you make an assumption, well, I believe that I can capture maybe 20% of whatever that number is. So if the number is 100,000, that's roughly 20,000 customers a year. So your assumption is that I can capture 20% of my target segment in the first year. And then let's say you're selling a product for $1, $20,000. If you're selling it for $10, and that's pretty much how you do your projections on it.
Yeah, and the reason we didn't talk about revenue as much is because that is a lot more company specific. As far as costs go, a lot of times those are structured similarly. Obviously, across different industries, the breakdown of what that is in relation to revenue is different, but the expenses are going to be the same. You're going to have your capital expenses, you're going to have your human expenses, you're going to have your operational expenses, and they're going to look very similar. But revenue is going to look very different from a Mexican restaurant to a software company, right? So that's why we didn't really talk about that, because that's going to be unique to your business, that you're going to go through and think about and iterate on when you do your linkings. So think about all that. It's all kind of goes together. So if you can think about it that way, it'll be a lot better.
And definitely, if y'all have any questions, you can always email us directly. It's info@eapla.com. So info@Echo Alpha Papa Lima Alpha.com. I used to be a flight attendant way back in the day, so yeah, I tend to do that a lot. So you can always, contact Dr. LeBach, and she can get in touch with us if you have a question before the submission. We're more than happy to help.
I didn't know P was Papa.
It's info@EAP, like Papa, LA.com.
I didn't know P was Papa. I knew the other ones, but.
Okay.
Anything else, guys, before we wrap up? Last minute questions? Yes. Yes, it is. Size. Thank you. We had the best